my water just broke. I felt like things really intensified.
She was right there and she was coming.
It was an amazing feeling.
I'm gonna cry just thinking about it. I could feel her head.
We heard her cry. We were squeezing hands and she was screaming.
I'm Bryn Hunt Palmer, and you're listening to The Birth Hour. This podcast is designed as a safe place to come together and share childbirth stories. Stick around and join us to hear informative and empowering birth journeys from all over the world. If you're new to the Birth Hour, you may not know that we have an online childbirth course that is evidence-based. It includes 12 modules that take you from your final weeks of pregnancy through obviously preparing for birth and then postpartum and feeding your baby as well. And with enrollment in that course, which is called Know Your Options, you'll get free access to our other course called Beyond the First Latch, where we talk all about pumping, feeding baby, storing milk, going back to paid work if that's part of your plan, all of those things as well. Okay, so if you go to thebirthhour.com/course, you can see everything laid out in the course, module by module, as well as an FAQ section, which will hopefully answer some of your questions if you have any, things like how to get it covered by an FSA account and things like that. It also talks about the bonuses that come with the course, including bi-monthly Zoom calls and access to our private Facebook group. So again, that's thebirthhour.com/course. And you can use the coupon code 100OFF for $100 off enrollment as a podcast listener. We would also love to welcome you into our listener supporter group via Patreon. That's at patreon.com/birthhour. And by becoming a Patreon supporter, you get access to all of our archived episodes. This podcast launched in 2015, so we have over 800 episodes in the archives that are not in the main podcast feed, so you can get your fill of birth stories. And you'll also get access to our private Facebook group for Patreon members, which is a great place to honestly just to search the past posts to get answers to questions, but then of course to ask new questions, find community. It's a really, really great supportive group of people. So I highly recommend joining that. We would love to have you there. We also do monthly Zoom calls with our Patreon supporters, and you get an opportunity to enter your birth story via a different submission form than everyone else uses, and we choose 2 Patreon members each month to share their birth stories. So that is again at patreon.com/birthhour. There's also the opportunity to give Patreon membership as a gift, and that's just patreon.com/birthhour/gift. And it's pretty cool. You can click on which level you want to join, and then you can click on how many months. So somebody can gift you a year, which gets you a pretty good discount, but also they could do 9 months as, for your whole pregnancy or something like that. So that's a fun option. And again, that's at patreon.com/birthhour/gift. Today's episode is in partnership with Anido. Anido is the only at-home fertility monitor that tracks 4 key hormones, estrogen, LH, PDG, and FSH, on a single test strip and provides lab-grade insights in just 10 minutes. Unlike other ovulation kits that only give you 1 to 2 fertile days, Anido tracks your full 6-day fertile window and doesn't just predict ovulation, it confirms it, which is essential information when trying to conceive or understand your hormone health. Instead of piecing together fragments of information, it offers a full, clear picture of hormone health. With 96% accuracy, Anido is as reliable as a blood test, minus the inconvenience and the expense. I've had the chance to personally use Anido, and I was amazed at the user experience of the app. You enter in your last period date, and from there the app guides you through exactly what to do and even sends a notification when it's time to test. The kit comes with everything you need to collect a urine sample, and the Anido connects to your phone's camera to read the test, so there's no squinting and guesswork, just easy to read results and clear directions when you're in that fertile window and when you ovulate. The Anido Starter Pack is available for just $89 with the code THEBIRTHHOUR at anido.com. That's INITO.com using the code THEBIRTHHOUR. Today's guest, Madeleine, actually used the Anido to get pregnant with her baby, whose birth story we're going to hear today, so listen for that in today's episode. In today's birth story, Madeleine talks about her experience with an early miscarriage, as well as going on to have a home birth with the same midwives who she had chosen with that first pregnancy. All right, let's hear from Madeleine. Hi, Madeleine. Welcome to the Birth Hour. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Hi, Bryn. Thank you so much for having me. I've been so excited.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to hear your story. But before we get to that, can you tell listeners just a little bit about you and your family?
Yeah, so I'm 23 years old. I have been married to my husband for 3 years. We met by him sliding into my DMs, and I'm so glad I saw that DM. We live in Florida. We are both Christian, and we just had our rainbow baby about a month ago.
Okay, so I know a big part of your story is the journey to getting pregnant with your rainbow baby. So why don't you just kind of start us off wherever you want to and wherever you're comfortable with your trying to conceive journey.
Okay, perfect. So my husband is a teacher, and because he's a teacher, he gets summer off. And so we really wanted, like, how cool would it be if our baby was born during summer? And so when we started to try to conceive, we were aiming to try to get pregnant with like a summer baby, but we weren't expecting to get pregnant on the first try. So we ended up getting pregnant with our baby would have been born in March, because we were thinking, let's try hit that window to have a few months, because we heard that it usually takes like 3 to 6 months to get pregnant. And so I was pregnant for about 5 weeks, and we lost that precious baby. We named that baby Luca. I never found out if we had a boy or girl, but I just have a gut feeling that we had a boy. And then we started trying to conceive again shortly after, once I was healed and I was checked by it and everything was good to go. And we got pregnant on our 4th cycle. While I was trying to conceive, we used this thing called a Nido, which is a fertility tracker. And it was so crazy how it happened, because, I'm also have like an Instagram community online. And what happened is that my friend told me that she used a Nido to get pregnant, and she actually just had a rainbow baby as well. And she used a Nido to get pregnant with her first baby. And the day after she told me about a Nido, they messaged me and asked me if I wanted to try their monitor. And so just like looking back, it was just so crazy how it happened.
Yeah.
And so that's how I got in contact with a Nido. And a Nido tracks 4 different hormones. It tracks LH, FSH, estrogen, and PDG, which is your progesterone metabolite. And so all of these hormones are so key in tracking your ovulation. That I was previously using the LH strips to see if I was ovulating. But the cool thing about a Nido is that it goes right into your phone. And so it literally tells you what day you are peak fertility.
Yeah.
And it will confirm your ovulation. So there are so many women out there that get a positive LH strip, but they're actually not ovulating. And it's because these other hormones are like so crucial in your ovulation. So it really just gives you like such peace of mind. And we actually got pregnant. We had a huge hurricane. We had a Category 5 hurricane coming direct to our hometown.
Oh my gosh.
It was so crazy. But I was so determined to still try to have a shot that cycle that I was like, not even a Category 5 hurricane is going to stop us from trying. Like nothing is going to stop us. So we actually conceived the first cycle that we used a Nido.
Very cool. Yeah, I feel like especially after a loss, like having any kind of control that you can have with trying to get pregnant again is so nice.
It is. And it was so nice to just see ovulation confirmed, because it just gave me such peace of mind.
Right. So you see the peak fertility, and then you have sex, and then you keep testing, and you can see that you actually ovulated based on the rising levels, right?
Yes. And we heard that, I remember reading online that your best chance of conceiving is the day before ovulation. And we actually conceived that way both times.
Okay.
So we had sex the day before ovulation and we conceived.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad it worked out. And
Me too.
yeah, and that you could share with our listeners about it. Because I've tried it out to just be able to talk about it, but I'm not trying to get pregnant, so it's a very different perspective. But it is really cool the way it attaches to your phone and just how much information it gives you.
Yeah, it's amazing how much information it gives you, and it's so easy to use.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So you found out you were pregnant, and what was that like? And then how was your pregnancy?
So it's so funny. So because I was on Instagram, I am a serial tester. Like I love taking pregnancy tests just because I just take so many, and so many people are like,
relatable.
Yes, it's like so addicting, and I want to see that line grow and everything. It just gives me so much peace of mind. But I had this urge to test early, and so I'm like, why even fight it? So I started posting videos of me testing at 2DPO, and obviously you're not going to get a pregnancy test at 2DPO. But from that, my Instagram grew more. And so people started following my journey more just because they probably thought I was crazy testing at 2-DPO.
Or they were searching, can you test at 2-DPO?
I know. I feel like you just search that. You're like, how soon can I know?
You're like, this girl did.
I know. So I was like, I'm not even going to resist it. I'm just going to test at 2-DPO and give in. So I actually tested positive at 7-DPO, which is so early, I feel like.
Yeah, definitely.
And I found out that evening, and then I told my husband, and we were just like, we were so shocked because the line was so faint, but it was definitely there. You know, like when you're like looking for a line and you have the flashlight out and you're holding that to the light.
Yeah. Oh, fun. Okay. And then how did you feel throughout pregnancy, and what kind of plans did you have for your birth?
So before we conceived our first baby, I actually was messaging a few midwives, and I was seeing an OBGYN, and I was just trying to figure out like what I wanted our game plan to be once we did get pregnant. I know that a few of the midwives here, they like book up like so fast. And so I really was trying to research, and I was really trying to find out who people recommend to have a midwife in our area. And when I brought up home birth to my husband, he was like, there's no way we're doing that. That's not safe. And I scheduled a free consultation with one of the local midwives. And we went to the consultation, and when in the car on the way home, he was like, we have to do a home birth. This woman is amazing.
Oh, wow.
He said, yes. And he was like, this is the smartest person I've ever met. Like, we have to do a home birth. And then ever since then, he was on board. So when we got pregnant with our rainbow baby, I called our midwife. I think we hadn't booked yet, but I called her like 8-DPO, and I put our $500 deposit down, and I wanted to get in there booked so quick because I already did the interviewing beforehand before we got pregnant. So I knew exactly who I wanted to go with. And a huge contributor and which midwife I went with was I had interviewed them before we got pregnant with our first baby. And when we lost our first baby, they were so sweet. And they sent this really sweet message about that they were so sorry for my loss, and that they were willing to do another free consultation and also get like my levels checked after my miscarriage and everything. And so seeing how compassionate they were for when I had given them no money and that I wasn't even a patient or client of theirs just really impacted me and my decision for who I wanted to go with.
Yeah, that's such a good feeling when you just like connect with your care provider and you know it's the right choice. And I love the change of heart from your husband. I feel like so many people just hear midwife and they think like it's this like woo-woo, like witchcraft or something.
Yes.
And don't know anything about it. So yeah.
That's so true. My pregnancy really went well. Like looking back at my pregnancy, I could totally do it again. The hardest part I had was SI pain. Did you ever have that with your pregnancies?
I don't think I had that specifically, but I mean, I had like all the different pain that got me right to the chiropractor. And we've definitely had other people talk about it.
Okay. So I had SI pain in my lower back, and I initially thought it was a UTI because it was so bad. So I went to the urgent care thinking it was a UTI, and they tried to prescribe me antibiotics when I didn't even have a UTI, which I'm so glad I didn't take it because I ended up testing negative for a UTI. But having that experience made me just like, I felt like that was so crazy.
Yeah. And was there anything that did help with that?
So I started going to the chiropractor, and that was a game changer in my pregnancy. By 41 weeks, I was like still moving and dancing. I felt really good. And so I definitely think that's from going to the chiropractor.
Awesome. Yeah, I always recommend that. And finding a chiropractor who's like specifically trained in working with pregnant women is always a good idea.
Yes, my chiropractor is Webster certified, and she actually came to our house the day after I gave birth to and did body work and adjusted my baby, which was so sweet.
Yeah, I had that with my second too as well.
Oh, that's amazing. And you definitely want someone who you're like comfortable seeing you that freshly postpartum too.
Yes, 100%. Someone you're looking forward to seeing.
Yes.
All right. Okay. So then what else did you guys do to prepare for the birth?
With my doula, she offers a local hypnobirthing class. This class was so amazing for my husband. I feel like a lot of it I knew just because I was obsessed with birth and like what you were saying earlier, like you loved listening to birth stories. And so I learned so much prior, but this class was so amazing for my husband because it taught him all the stages of labor and ways to help me cope with the pain for an unmedicated birth. And it was a game changer. And it was honestly so much fun. And we got to meet other couples who are pregnant around the same time as us.
Awesome. Yeah, that's always great to find the community. All right, well, let's go ahead and talk about how labor started for you.
So at 39 weeks and 2 days, I had bloody show, and I was so excited thinking this must be it, but it was a false alarm. I had heard that after bloody show, you usually go into labor 24 hours after, but that did not happen to me. Did you ever have bloody show?
Yeah, no, I don't think I ever had the bloody show in the way that I've heard people talk about it on the podcast, but I definitely was like checking every time I wiped.
Okay. So at 39 weeks and 2 days, that bloody show must have been a false alarm because labor never started. But at 40 weeks and 6 days at 1 p.m., I had it again. And I was like, okay, this has to be the real deal this time. And it was.
Exciting.
I know. I remember just being so excited when I saw the bloody show, because when you're in those last few weeks of pregnancy, it just feels like a time warp and the days feel so long. And it's like, is this baby ever going to come out of me?
Yeah, totally. Every day feels like a week.
It truly does. So at 41 weeks in the morning at 2:30 a.m., I woke up in labor and my contractions were about 15 minutes apart. And my husband was still asleep, and I didn't want to wake him up because I knew that I was going to need him and his energy to help me. And I had heard that advice from a few other people to just let your husband sleep for as long as you can. And so that's what I did. So at 2:30, I woke up and I felt pressure on my cervix, and the contractions were fairly consistent. And so they just kept going. So I was like, I was thinking it might be prodromal labor, but I was really hoping that it was the real deal, which it was. I remember asking my midwife, how do I know the difference between prodromal labor and actual labor? And she says that you have a baby at the end of it. She's right.
That's funny.
I also had, like my body was clearing out, like I was having diarrhea consistently, which I know is a sign. And so I kept having it. And I was like, oh, good. Like this really has to be it.
Okay. So those were your early labor signs. And then was there a point where things kind of changed a lot and you were like, okay, time to call the midwife?
Yeah. So I was in early labor, and around 7:30 a.m., I ended up texting my doula that I was in labor, and my husband was still asleep. So he didn't even know I was in labor at this point. But once my husband woke up, I was so excited. And I was like, are you excited to meet your son today? And he was like, you're not in labor. And I was like, yes, I literally in labor. And then he told me that his neck hurt because he slept weird.
Oh gosh, never gonna let him forget that.
I never, and that's why I'm saying that, because I never want to forget that, because it was so funny that he did not believe me that I was in labor. So at 8 a.m., I realized that my contractions were starting to slow down a little bit, and my doula recommended me to just put my blackout curtains down. She said that sometimes when the sun comes up, your labor, like things can slow back down, and I really wanted things to keep picking up. And so that actually helped my contractions come back closer together when I just stayed in my bedroom and I kept everything dark. And then at 9 a.m., I called my midwife to tell her I was in early labor, and my contractions then were about 7 to 9 minutes apart. And I kept messaging my doula at this time, but now my husband was up, and so we were able to do everything together, and he was helping me with the contractions, and I didn't feel like I needed her yet. Okay,
so you had a little bit of an easing into active labor, it sounds like.
Yes, I didn't hit active labor until 1:30 a.m. And by then my contractions were 5 minutes apart, about 90 seconds long. Like I had them for like at least an hour by the time I just kept going and going. And I was like, I just remember being so excited and being in awe. It was moving so quickly. Like I just figured because I was a first time mom, I would be in labor for like 72 hours, because I feel like that's every single story I hear. But I actually, in total, I was in labor for 21 and a half hours, which I feel like is pretty quick in the moment.
Yeah, especially if it wasn't like super intense until a good ways into that.
Yeah, I didn't feel like it was super intense until transition.
Okay. So at 1:30, had anyone come over yet?
So by 3:30, my birth photographer came, who's also my best friend. And she came over and she braided my hair, and she was coming to take cutesy pictures of my husband and I, like before things got really intense. But she actually just ended up staying until our baby was here.
Okay. All right. So birth photographer was the first part of your birth team to arrive. And then at what point did you call your doula or your midwife?
So at 4:30 p.m., I had such an intense contraction, and all of a sudden I was like, "Where's Allie?" And I was like, "I need my doula ASAP." It like hit me out of nowhere. Up until then, my husband was doing all the hip squeezes, and we felt really good just by themselves. And it was like, boom, like I need support now. And my doula arrived around 5:20 p.m. And when I saw her, it was just instant relief. And I just started crying because when I saw her face, I knew I was getting closer. I was getting closer to the finish line.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then at 5:30, I had my husband call my midwife, and my midwife was able to hear me on the phone, hear me labor, and go through some contractions. And that helped her figure out that she needed to come now because things were moving a lot faster than we thought they were. So at the end of active labor, I ended up getting in the shower, and my husband and my doula went ahead and started setting up the birth tub. And my birth photographer was so sweet. She was doing hip squeezes too and helping me in the shower go through the contractions. By 6 p.m., I hit transition where my contractions were 2 minutes apart. And I noticed that my belly was significantly lower. My baby was never engaged before I started labor. But at this point, I noticed my belly was significantly lower and squishier at the top. So he definitely was dropping. My midwife ended up coming in the door at 6:20 p.m. right when my water broke. As soon as my water broke, I was on all four and I was like, oh, my water just broke. It was so weird because I had forgotten about my water, and I was honestly surprised that it hasn't broken up until this point. But I'd heard that sometimes the contractions hurt worse if your water is already broken. So my midwife comes in, and all of a sudden I'm like, I have to poop. I have to poop. And I started pushing immediately right when she came in, and the urge of pushing just like it's unlike no other. And it's so hard to not push when you have that feeling. And then when my midwife came in and she was like, I don't think we're going to be having this baby in the tub. We were still filling up the tub. And so we all thought it was going to happen a little quicker. We didn't know that I'd be pushing for 4.5 more hours.
Oh man.
So I ended up pushing a lot longer than we all thought. At this point, I didn't have any cervical checks, and we all fully believed that the baby was coming down. And so she had me get on the bed, and we did pushing, and she just watched me through some contractions, and she checked my vitals, and she used the Doppler to check our baby's vitals and got the whole bed ready and everything out for the birth. And then my husband was still filling up the tub at this time because I still really wanted to have a water birth. I remember feeling shocked because I just felt like he was going to come out so much faster. And I kept saying, is he crowning yet? Is he crowning yet? But he really wasn't. He really wasn't even close to crowning.
Oh my gosh.
And around 7:30, I ended up getting into the birth pool because it was finally filled. And so I pushed there in the birth pool, and my midwife was like, why don't we just can I give you a cervical check? The way I wanted my birth to go is I really wanted to have a hands-off birth with no cervical checks, but I was open to it. And I feel like I'm so grateful for the experience because I want to tell moms that it's okay if what you think about your birth and things you don't want to do or do during your birth, it's okay if that changes because you never know how birth is going to go. It's unpredictable. And so I went in wanting no cervical checks, but the cervical checks were so helpful for me. And I never experienced any pain when I had cervical checks. It was so sweet. At 7:30 p.m. when I was in the tub, my midwife and my doula came over and they prayed for me. And it was just so sweet how our entire birth team was Christian and I had worship music playing. And it was just so, so sweet to have that support. So when my midwife gave me a cervical check, she noticed that I had a cervical lip, which is when part of your cervix does not fully go away. And so my baby was stuck on the cervical lip and he was not going past the pubic bone because of that cervical lip. And so she held her fingers in there while I was pushing and she was able to try to move it. And my cervical lip ended up resolving around 9:47 and I had an anterior cervical lip. And then once that cervical lip resolved, like he was coming down fast. And at this point, we had gotten into the bed to just, for my midwife to just better see what was going on. Because at this point, I'd already been pushing for about 3 hours. On my 4th hour of pushing is when it got scary. I noticed that something was wrong because even though I didn't know exactly all the things that were happening, I noticed that my midwife started whispering and that my doula had completely stopped talking. And this is when my birth turned into like a true home birth emergency. My doula stopped talking, and she was praying at the time, which I didn't know. But I remember looking back and seeing all this meconium, and I knew that meconium was a sign that your baby is in distress. My midwife kept using the Doppler throughout my birth. She was using the Doppler around 10 to 15 minutes. And at the end of it, I noticed she was using the Doppler every 2 to 3 minutes. And so that was also another sign that something wasn't right. And at the end, it got very scary. His heart rate dropped all the way down to 60, and he was in distress for 9 minutes. And it was the craziest feeling because before she ended up calling 911, I already knew that she was going to call 911. And I fully believe that God went before and prepared me, because I just had this feeling that she was going to call 911. And throughout this whole thing, I was not afraid. So he went into distress. We had the meconium. His heart rate went all the way down. And I'd been pushing for over 4 hours at this point. And I told her, and I said, "You need to cut me." And she was like, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Cut me." And for me to just ask for an episiotomy in that moment, I never would have thought that I would be having an episiotomy unmedicated, but it really did help him come out. So she had me lay on my side. And the reason why she couldn't give lidocaine is that she said it would have hurt more. Lidocaine excites the nerves when you give it. It also takes a few minutes for it to work. And at this point, we did not have any time. So the paramedics were on the way. She had the birth assistant call 911. My doula asked me if I still wanted my photographer to keep taking photos. And I was like, go ahead and stop. And then she went out to our living room and she started clearing the way. So for the stretcher and for the paramedics to come in. And she asked our birth assistant, and she said, "Are they going to be okay?" And the birth assistant said, "I don't know." But obviously we were okay. So at this point, my husband hears the word "cut me," and he goes to the bathroom and he has a moment. He's white as ghost. He starts freaking out, but my doula grabs him and then helps him come onto the bed to support me. So I get on my side. She does the episiotomy, and I am just like holding on to my husband. And I don't even really remember what it felt like in that moment, because I was just feeling like so much pressure down there. It's really hard to remember exactly what you're feeling because you're just feeling so much. And so right before she cut me, she locked eyes with me and said, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Do it." And I remember praying and asking God to give me the strength. And 4 minutes after my episiotomy, my baby came out crying immediately. He wasn't even off my perineum and he was crying. And he was on my chest, and I just remember my husband weeping with joy, and he was just saying, "That's our son, that's our son." And my midwife told me later after that she was fully prepared to resuscitate him, and she called 911 so that she knew that the baby was going to be out then, but she believed that she was going to have to resuscitate him, and then my baby and I would be transferred to the hospital. And I just remember holding our baby, and I was so weak at this point, but my husband helped me hold our baby. And I just remember my husband, he was so sweet. I remember he said, "I'm going to take such good care of you and Cooper." And I was just lying there, and my husband just said that. And it just made me feel so loved and taken care of.
That's so sweet. So then did the paramedics show up?
Yes. So I remember it's so funny. We are recording this right now where I'm on my bed, right where I gave birth, which is such like a surreal moment. And so I'm lying there just like I just had the episiotomy, my baby's crying, and the EMS, they peek their head in and they have like the biggest smiles on their face. And I'm sure it's because they're walking into a house with a crying baby, and they had a very scary like 911 call. And so they knew what they were expecting, and they got to walk into a room with the crying, healthy baby. And my baby's score, APGAR score at 1 minute was 8. And then at 5 minutes, it was 9. And they came in and they did vitals for me and vitals for my baby. And they were just so great. It was just such a great experience with the EMS. And they did all of his vitals while he was on my chest too. And then my midwife says, okay, you're good to go. And that was it. And then the EMS just left and they almost forgot their bag, which I think is so funny because it's just like pure adrenaline at that point for them. And as they were leaving, I was literally delivering my placenta.
Wow.
And so I just remember like waving as I'm delivering my placenta and they're leaving the house. But it was such a great thing that we didn't have to transfer because I was just imagining like when they made the 911 call, I was just imagining pushing on a stretcher. Like, so it was so amazing that they were able to just leave.
Yeah. So then your midwives, did they just kind of stick around for a little bit and then tuck you into bed?
So I found out after I had my meal and I was all cleaned up, my midwife came and sat on the bed with me and she explained things that I could not see during my birth. So I didn't know that I had the anterior cervical lip and his head was also asynclitic, which means his head was tilted to the side. And so he was trying to come out the birth canal, which is head to the side. And he also got stuck because like I could reach down and feel him and he was so close, but he never crowned. And that was because I had my hymenal ring was so tight that it was not giving way and we didn't have time for it to give way at that point. So we had several things going on. We had the cervical lip, which made me push for a long time because I didn't make progress until it resolved. And then we had his head position and it was asynclitic. And then my hymenal ring that was just so tight. And then he was also posterior. And so he was turning anterior during birth. He came out anterior. We don't know exactly during labor when he turned, but that was definitely part of the reason for why I was pushing so long.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's a lot of factors.
Yeah, it really was. I feel like one of those factors would have been normal, but I just had so many stacked on top of each other that made it rare.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So our baby was born at 11:06. And after he was born, we did skin to skin. I delivered my placenta. My husband got to hold him. And then before they stitched me up and everything, they had me take a shower. So I was all clean. I was covered in meconium at this point, like covered. I was a hot mess. And then my doula was so sweet. She just held me up in the shower. She was soaking at that point in the shower too. I was like, I feel so bad that you're getting wet in the shower. She was like, it's fine. It's fine. And so she's holding me up and cleaning me off. And at this point, I was still feeling like pretty like, what the heck just happened? Because I was not expecting an episiotomy to push for 4.5 hours. And so I was still feeling very disassociated, but I was feeling disassociated for about like the first couple days, but I'm fine now. It was just a rough end there. And then after I cleaned up, they had me get on the bed and I started breastfeeding my baby. And then they did the stitches. My midwife had lidocaine with her, so she did the lidocaine injections, and then they also use lidocaine topical. So I didn't feel any of the stitches. I remember like the back stitches hurt the most, but the lidocaine like helped so much. Like I honestly didn't feel anything with the injection.
That's good.
So my doula heated up my first postpartum meal. And so I had beef stew and she fed me on the bed. She spoon fed me and we got all tucked in and then they left. And it was like, oh my goodness, now we have this baby.
Yeah, that's always a little surreal.
It really is.
Especially in your own bed. All right. Well, I want you to talk a little bit about postpartum. You're still very much in the thick of it, but you mentioned, it took a few days for you to kind of get your bearings.
Yeah. So I am a little over a month postpartum now. The first few days, I feel like are a blur. I honestly was not expecting postpartum to be as rough, but I also know it's not always normal to push for that long. So I definitely think my body was a little bit more beat up than normal. I am so grateful for my husband because I was so weak after birth. I actually didn't lose that much blood. Like my midwife said my blood loss was like very minimal, but just the pushing really made my body so physically exhausted. So my husband in the middle of the night and during the day would would pick up my baby and help grab the breast in one hand and hold the baby with the other and help me latch. Like, he is so much better at latching the baby than I am. And I'm so grateful for him because I honestly would not be breastfeeding if it weren't for him. He knew how important it was for me. And so that's why he did that.
That's awesome. I love that teamwork. And I feel like not only it helping you to actually work, but just the moral support during the middle of the night and stuff like that is so key.
Yes, it really is.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that story and your whole journey with us. Do you have any resources you want to share?
Yes, I'd love to share about Anito, which is the fertility tracker I used. And I used that when I was trying to conceive for my rainbow baby. And we got pregnant the first cycle of using Anito. And it just gave us so much peace of mind to know that my body was actually ovulating. I also used Christian hypnobirthing tracks during pregnancy. I also used them during early labor. And then I absolutely love the book, Ina May's Guide to Natural Childbirth. I read that when I was pregnant, and it was just so encouraging to hear all of the positive birth stories.
Yeah, that is one that gets recommended a lot for sure. And yeah, we love the birth stories in there. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing those resources. We will put them on your show notes page. And then where's the best place for people to connect with you?
Yeah, so please connect with me on Instagram. My Instagram is Homemaking with Madeleine, and I love it when y'all message me. So please message me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you so much, Bryn. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks again to Madeleine for sharing her story with us and to Anito for partnering with us on this episode. If you want to head over to anito.com, INITO.com, and use the coupon code THEBIRTHHOUR, you can get that starter kit with the Anito device for just $89. That's $60 off of the regular price. So it's a great deal. I will link to that in the podcast app where you're listening to this episode, as well as on the show notes page. To find the show notes page, you can go to thebirthhour.com and just search for Madeleine's name in the search bar, and they'll bring it up for you. You can see her resources. She has some great pictures from her birth. And then, of course, I will link to Anito with that coupon code as well.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, head to thebirthhour.com and click Become a Member to pledge your support. And as a thank you, you'll get an invitation to join our private Facebook group and access to exclusive episodes. Your vote of confidence and support means the world to me.